And when it comes to living kid-free, and specifically to a person's decision or choice to live kid-free, my goal is really to help my audience alleviate some of the inner conflict and sort of address some of the negative emotions that I know that I have personally experienced. And from what I gather, many of you have as well. If you are a regular listener of this podcast, you already know that the tone of my content and really the tone of my whole brand is empathetic, or at least aspires to be so. So today, on International Childfree Day, nonetheless, I want to talk about empathy, and specifically empathy towards moms. It's easy to hate a mom of a tantrumous child, and it's also easy to hate the tantrumous child itself when you see them in the grocery store and you've never seen them before and you'll never see them again. I know the feeling where you're just that feeling of rage and disgust and annoyance just bubbles up, and you just you're just that person, God, she sucks, and her kid sucks too. It's a lot harder though to hate a mom who is also your friend or your sister or your colleague, but these relationships can and do sour when children come into the picture. And I've talked about this a lot on the podcast before. I did an episode on adjusting expectations of your parent friends, which is really one really important way of coping with this. But today I want to explore 3 reasons to consider choosing a path of empathy and acceptance for moms rather than a path of judgment and resistance. Because at the end of the day, I firmly believe that choosing a path of judgment and resistance negatively impacts you far more than it negatively impacts her. And since I'm here for you, here goes. The first concept I want to explore is this idea of mommy brain. Researchers have been studying the effects of pregnancy and birth on women for about 20 years, and it can be referred to as basically maternal brain mapping. For pregnant women and new moms, gray matter in the brain is actually reduced. And gray matter, quote, plays a large role in muscle control and in the execution of high-level tasks like seeing, hearing, processing memories and emotions, and decision-making. Mommy brain is essentially depressed functioning of concentration and short-term memory and reflects a reduced ability to learn and retain new information. So what does that mean? In short, being a new mom basically consumes your entire brain with the end goal of making sure the baby is number one at all times. Mommy brain is basically a brain that has rewired itself to focus on building new connections and optimizing brain functioning to focus on specific behaviors or activities, like bonding with the baby, for example. I really love this research so much because it's so important. The data behind how a woman's brain changes when she has a child can and must be factored into our expectations of how new moms can and should engage with the world and with other people in and outside of their home. As I mentioned before, I've done a couple of episodes on the topic of losing friends to parenthood, specifically to motherhood, and adjusting expectations of our new mom friends when they become parents. And there is a prevalent sentiment in the child-free community, and also sadly, I think some resentment because of how difficult it can be to really maintain friendships once babies are born. And the pain, the frustration that many of us feel comes from our perception that we become instantly irrelevant when our friends have kids, as if the equity we have amassed in the friendship just disappears and plummets in value to the parents. But if you look at this research on mommy brain and you look at the data behind this mommy brain phenomenon, you will understand that she is literally biologically incapable of not only being the person she used to be, but also incapable of prioritizing you the way you may want her to. The second mommy concept I want to dive into is this idea of mommy martyrdom. Modern women face a constant dilemma when they become moms, and it's really an unsolvable problem. Moms face intense scrutiny and criticism that just flies at them from all angles, and really often from people who allegedly love and want the best for them, like family. Perpetual conflict between home and work, kids versus the relationship or partnership, caring for others versus caring for themselves, and just the conflicting demands that are just completely irreconcilable. There's a quote I saw in this article from New York Times that says, moms are focused on, quote, managing families instead of being a part of them. And I was like, ugh, that sucks. Another article I read that was written by a psychiatrist who treats and sort of specializes in women's mental health said that, quote, nearly every mother I have treated during the pandemic fights through decision fatigue, rage, and a feeling of powerlessness every day. Motherhood takes a crushing toll on women's mental and physical health. The drudgery and relentlessness of motherhood and parenting, combined with the self-deprecation and guilt and shame that we as women are socialized to impose upon ourselves, combined with the physical toll of birth and motherhood, combined with rampant criticism from both loved ones and strangers, combined with the simple fact that babies and young children are just inherently super annoying. That is the reality of modern motherhood. Childfree women are also the recipients of plenty of criticism. We endure our fair share of, shall I say, feedback from loved ones and strangers as well. We have all experienced criticism, questioning, judgment, prejudice, rejection, and disrespect blatantly, and also in microaggressions. As women, child-free or not, when we choose to kind of see ourselves as victims, as martyrs, and we sit in that space and we feed it with our energy and our headspace and our time, we're really reinforcing and nurturing an aspect of our identity that, while undeniably rooted in real, tangible, proven adversity or suffering, also reinforces this self-image that we are powerless and therefore must compete with one another in order to feel secure. The thing is, any competition between moms and non-moms, any competition between women generally, over who gets shafted more or who has it harder is really ultimately a distraction from the bigger issue at play here, which is, no surprise, the motherfucking patriarchy. Women have been subjugated for millennia. We have put ourselves through excruciating pain to shape and mold our identities and lifestyles to fulfill standards for beauty and behavior that have not only been defined by men, but invented out of thin air with very little regard for our personal health and well-being. And really the end goal of these standards is to make men's lives better and richer and easier. I use the word pain loosely here to encompass immeasurable amounts of collective bullshit and suffering on the part of women. Because at the end of the day, parenting often sucks. And men have really never desired to be the ones really shouldering the suck of it all. So, as power holders, they simply made up rules that insulated them from the suck. And these rules have prevailed and dominated for millennia and continue to do so today despite what we have been told by said patriarchal institutions. So as women, as moms and non-moms, rather than be distracted and resent one another for our respective life choices and lifestyles, personally, I prefer to practice empathy and respect alongside mamas and really expect the same in return from them so we can, unite against the real enemy here. The last mom-related concept I want to explore is the idea of the Mombie. For those of you who aren't familiar with this term, it means a mom who is so consumed and obsessed with her children that she looks and acts like a zombie. To me, a Mombie is simply a woman who is suffering from poor mental and physical health as a direct result of being a mom. I've talked about this term Mombie before, and I have expressed my disdain for it. Not only because it's ugly, but because it's a term that is like uniquely applied to moms. Because the dad equivalent, which is daddict, as in like addicted to being a dad, has a much gentler and, dare I say, positive connotation without the like, oh, he looks like death insinuation that the word Mombie conjures to mind. So first of all, just that, like moms get the shit end of like even their own insults. I kind of view being a mom as a job, not in the sense that it's like a paid profession or occupation, but in the sense that not everyone is qualified to do it, let alone do it well, let alone also feel happy and be healthy while they do it. Women are socialized to view motherhood as like natural and automatic, even divine. And we are led to believe and expect that motherhood will be like a beautiful, joyful, serene, heart-exploding experience. And those of us who opted out of motherhood or parenting for one reason or another were able to like figure out that this was a bullshit notion without actually having to have kids to prove that to ourselves. And I like wholeheartedly commend us for that. But I do think that many people are essentially seduced into becoming parents pretty much by how parenting and family life is like marketed and portrayed. And as a result, expectations are frequently not aligned with reality. And I do believe that this can be and frequently is devastating. According to the CDC, 1 in 8 US women experiences postpartum depression, which is about 13%. For dads, Cleveland Clinic says it's about 10%. And it's important to note that there is far more data on postpartum depression for women than men. And I'm actually quite pleased to see it becoming more of a focus over the past year or so because, parenting sucks for men too. Bottom line is the impact of parenting on mental health can be very severe. And I think poor mental health, generally speaking, is deserving of empathy. As child-free folks, we think and we say things like, parents aren't allowed to complain. They should have known what they were getting into. Like, how could they not know how hard and sucky parenting is? Some of us choose not to have kids exclusively because of mental health concerns, which I think is so like introspective and powerful and forward thinking. And I just have so much respect for people who opt out of parenting because of this fact. To child-free people, it may seem unfathomable that someone could like blindly procreate without taking the mental health toll into consideration. But for many people, and I would actually argue most people, especially in the US, mental health doesn't even cross their minds. It does not factor in. It is not a concern. And it's not necessarily because they are aware of it and disregard it. I think it's more that they aren't even aware to be concerned about it. And mental health awareness is an epic American fail, full stop. And parenting can and does put mental health at great risk. So when I think about the word Mombie and I think about the mental state of a mom who is like deserving of that wretched name, I choose a path of empathy rather than judgment. Today, on International Child-Free Day, I challenge you to practice empathy. And, this is about you. Like, do it for yourself, for your own good, for your own mental health. This is a practice for you, by you, that benefits you and may actually even help others as well that you care about. I am so grateful to be child-free. I think being child-free clears up a vast amount of headspace and like computing power in my brain that allows me to make sense of the world rather than struggle to keep pace. I think being child-free allows me to aspire to a level of mental health and tenacity and peace that would otherwise be completely unattainable. I think being child-free empowers me to thrive instead of survive. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Live Kid Free podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so on Instagram. I'm at Live Kid Free.